Hey everybody, Tony D and Little Joan here on Hot Take. We're going to talk about the woke cult. The woke cult. And I'm going to consult the Twitter of someone who I think is pretty wise, James Lindsay. Or Lindsay. Lindsay? James Lindsay. Lindsay, I guess. Anyhow, for those of you who don't know, James was one on the team that put together these fake academic papers that were just insanely ridiculous. Like one of them was, oh, like if you don't have sex with a trans woman, you can't really be straight, kind of thing. Like what the purpose of the exercise was to come up with these crazy academic papers and get them accepted. They took Mein Kampf and rewrote it for feminism, and they put it into English and they took out all the references that would have given it away as being Mein Kampf, but basically kept the premise and stuff like that. And a lot of their crazy papers got accepted and won awards, and it was to show how academia has been just completely compromised by the cult of woke. And Lindsay, he has a book out. What the heck is it called? Check it later, but actually, it's probably on his Twitter account. Let's see. New discourses. Oh, what the heck's the name of his book? Now I gotta go to Amazon. Amazon. Well, there's the name of one of my books. The Pineys, number 4. Should check that out. And all my other books. Here's James Lindsay. Oh, here it is. Cynical theories. Cynical theories. How activist scholarship made everything about race, gender, and identity, and why it harms everyone. And his co-author is Helen Pluckrose. He is a guy who's all about the cult of woke. And this is an interesting. He puts on these Twitter threads, which are actually pretty interesting. And I know Twitter is a hellscape, but if you're on Twitter, definitely subscribe to James's account. So I just want to read a little bit of what he wrote. He writes, I just got asked about what to do when a friend is so far into the woke cult that he's disowning family members and lifelong friends. That's hard, both emotionally and, so far as answers go, practically. It's a situation a lot of us are in right now, and there are no good answers. Yes. Yes, this is definitely something I have thought about. I have friends, they're not in the cult of woke, but they're damn close. They're damn close, and it's very difficult to discuss politics with them. And I try not to. I try to avoid political discussions with them at every turn because they're just so unreasonable. He continues, really hard and unusually badly dangerous for a relationship to try and confront or intervene with a friend who is falling into a cult. If he's already to the point of disowning family, there are no easy answers. If you intervene, you'll get cut out and probably emotionally abused. So if you try to intervene, prepare yourself for that first. It's very hard, but you have to temporarily and partially absolve your friend or loved one of moral responsibility. They're in a kind of frenzy and they're not themselves. That might turn around later, and that's key. Most likely, you will just have to let the mania run its course for now and try to reconcile with the person later. Do stay open to it, should he come back around. That's one of the most important factors in helping people exit cults. There are ways you can navigate this clearly. And I'm reminded of if you've ever watched the specials on Scientology and how a lot of people got out of that. Some people, even some of the people who got out, who now they sort of recognize it as a cult, but they sort of don't. They kind of they're one guy, I forget his name. He's super famous, and I forget his name in Hollywood. He's a writer and everything. He got out, and he eventually bought his way to the top. And when you get to the top of Scientology, they tell you about Xenu and all that craziness. And that's when he finally said, "Okay, Okay, I'm done. And he was in very early on when it was like, more like Est or whatever that was called. And, he wanted to believe it was really helping people. And for a long time he did. And now he's out of it. And I, I don't know. His exit almost felt like he exited because there's like no more money he could put into it. But I think there are people who are they're just naturally open to cults because they just don't want to think, and it's easier for them to just kind of follow the herd. But James Lindsay continues. You should tell any such friend that you care about them, and that won't easily change. You should tell them that you have no interest in pressuring them to do anything except what they feel is best and most important, but that you're not going along or supporting it, meaning the woke of cult, or the cult of woke. You should make it clear under reasonable conditions you're ready and willing to forgive a lot under these circumstances and will be there for them to reconnect and rebuild. Little or no hard feelings should they come around, but stay firm. You're not going along with, again, the cult. At that point, get ready for invective and abuse. Get ready for a slammed door and realize it's a frenzied state pushing someone into being a literally different person than your friend or loved one. They are, for now, someone else. It's still going to hurt, probably a lot. Yeah, I would agree with that. So prepare yourself for grief, steel yourself for abuse, and ready yourself to forgive on down the line. That, I'm afraid, is almost all you can do once someone is so invested that they're destroying key relationships for a cult ideology. Yeah, it's sad. It's sad. And people also, when they, I think, do come out of these cults, they also realize the damage they've done, and they're too embarrassed to come back to the people they cut out of their lives and just say, hey, I'm sorry. Hey, I'm sorry for the way I acted or the way I said things, And I think we all can relate to that to some degree. You kind of screw the pooch. You go too far in an argument or a fight with a friend or whatever. It's hard to, come back and say, hey, I was really out of line or whatever. It's really tough. The cult of woke. The only upside, I guess, to it is because it's such a vague kind of cult. It does have these rules and all these cult-like things around them, but there's still no like official handbook kind of thing. Because I think with some of the more, with like Scientology or some of the other religions and or cults, they are more official. So there's a certain logic to taking that official narrative and kind of breaking it down and to see that this is nothing. But whereas you got the cult of woke, it's more nebulous, so people can interpret it differently. So when you're trying to get somebody out or you're trying to be reasonable with them, they could say, well, that's your interpretation. Really, it's this. And then they can shift the goalpost here and there. And it's hard to sort of pin people down, what's real, what's not, what's right, what's wrong. But this is a trend. And unfortunately, even if you look back on some of, I remember this documentary on this cult somewhere out in the West, where the cult bought like land and tried to take over this town. There was this whole documentary on it. One of the interesting things is some people still really like the cult. The cult was over, but they continued to kind of compliment the cult leader, and that some of the things they still walked away with it saying, well, some of the things were positive. And I feel like it all comes back down to this. I know this is going to be weird, but one of my favorite all-time old TV shows is The Rockford Files. I don't know if you've ever seen it. The Rockford Files starred James Gardner as a private detective who he was always getting beat up, which was part of the show. Anyhow, there's this great episode where Rockford has to go up against this cult and help this woman, and he helps her get out of the cult. And the episode has this amazing ending, and it was very different for an old show like that. So the episode ends typically in old TV show fashion, like, yay, Rockford saved the day and everybody's happy and this woman gets out of the cult and, he gets paid finally and, it's all good. And then the show cuts to a year later and Jim Rockford, James Gardner's character, is coming out of the courthouse on a completely different case, and he runs into this woman. And it's like, hey, how you doing? And it's a year later, and it's like, she's got a pamphlet for another cult she's joined. And it's like, that woman will never get out. She needs a cult to tell her what to do. And that's part of the problem with cults in general and the cult of woke. There are people who really enjoy it, on a sort of a subconscious level. They have no responsibilities really because they're told what to think and they know how to act in every situation because the cult dictates your behavior and dictates what's good and bad. And that is comforting because you always know what's right in a cult, Thankfully, though, there's no leaders really, and I think the cult of woke is doomed to failure once it goes out of vogue. You'll be left with a handful of, people that are just messed up, still trying to push it, and maybe they'll end up joining some sort of splinter group that branches off of this. But I think for the most part, we just, like James Lindsay says, you kind of just have to wait them out. You have to wait out this mania. It's going to calm down, and eventually it'll be like it never happened. And I think the vast majority of the people who are currently in this cult of woke and caught up in it, they'll just pretend like they never were in it. And part of them will lie to themselves to the point is where I was never really that into it, because people do that to themselves. I had a friend who, during the Bush era, he was like, I'm moving to Canada if Bush gets reelected. I'm looking into it, man. He didn't move to Canada. He wasn't going to. And then years later, I brought it up. He didn't even remember the conversation. People forget, that their minds sort of take care of that kind of uncomfortable thoughts, like, boop, and they're gone from your brain, So it's very interesting. Anyhow, check out James Lindsay and his book, Cynical Theories, with, critical theories marked out. He's got some good stuff, and he's definitely on the cult of woke's butt.